This is the Secular Nation Podcast, an official production of the Atheist Alliance of America, bringing you breaking news and stories about the intersection of the atheist free thought movement and government action.
So hello and welcome to another episode of Secular Nation. My name is Dr. Juhem Navarro-Rivera. I'm your guest host for today. A little bit about my background. I'm here hosting this show from Washington, D.C. today. At the time of recording, we're very close to the inauguration of the 45th President, Donald J. Trump. After this show is going to be aired after he is actually sworn in. A little bit of my background. I'm a political scientist. I study the intersection of race, secularism, and politics. I have written several chapters, articles on the subject, and currently my research focuses on the viability of the secular movement as a major political force in the United States. My expertise is in American political behavior, a little bit more also into American political institutions. My most recent work, which was actually published last week, it's Secularism, Race, and Political Affiliation in America. Is a chapter in the Oxford Handbook of Secularism, edited by two leading scholars of secularism in America, John Shook for the University at Buffalo, and Phil Zuckerman of Pitzer College, and the chair of the only secularism studies program in the country. It was co-authored by my esteemed colleague and friend and wife, Dr. Yasmin Garcia Trejo. We're both affiliated with the Institute of Latin American, Latino, and Caribbean Studies at the University of Connecticut. I also have affiliations with the Institute for the Study of Secularism in Society and Culture in Trinity College in Connecticut. And during the day, I'm actually a policy analyst for a think tank. So I'm a DC insider, so to be. Today we're going to have a very interesting show, even though we know that the results weren't what most of secular voters actually wanted, which over the years have been heavily supportive of Democratic Party candidates. That was not the exception of 2016. And given the nominations so far for the president's cabinet have been leaning heavily on figures of the religious right, which are not the darling of people in the secular movement, and who are considered very dangerous by many of us. I want to focus on good news of the things that happened in 2016. In the secular movement, as we know, a quarter of Americans and a larger proportion even of young people in this country identify with no religion. Not all of them are atheists or agnostics, but most of them don't go to church. Many of them do not believe in a deity. And many of them don't consider that religion should have a major part in the policymaking process. And so it is my pleasure to announce my guest of honor tonight, which is Dr. Ron Millar, who is the PAC coordinator for the Freethought Equality Fund, which is a secular PAC. And I'm here actually talking to him. Welcome, Ron, and thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Ron, I reckon that you're a fellow doctor and that your expertise is in public policy,
yes,
public administration. Tell us a little bit of what do you do here with the PAC, how you started working at the PAC, and what's your day-to-day running this important organization.
Sure. Like you said, I'm the PAC coordinator for the Freethought Equality Fund. The Freethought Equality Fund is affiliated with the Center for Freethought Equality, which is the lobbying and advocacy arm of the American Humanist Association. So back in February, I was thrilled when Roy Speckhart came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to come work on the PAC?" And I said, "Sure." And so I jumped right in. I've been with the secular movement for a little while. Back in 2005, I became the second employee to be working with the Secular Coalition for America. I was I don't know, I had many titles, but essentially I did all the admin to make sure that the great director of SCA, Lori Lippman Brown, was able to do a lot of lobbying on Capitol Hill. So during that time, I worked there until 2009, I believe. We built up the staff to 5 members, and currently I'm treasurer of the Secular Coalition for America, so I've still stayed involved with SCA. And naturally, American Humanist Association is a member group of the Secular Coalition, so I got to know Roy well, and Roy knew a little bit about my background, and so again, I was thrilled because I love working on elections. Running a PAC for atheists and humanists is a dream job, so thanks.
And so, how did the fund got started? Because if I'm not wrong, you have been around for 2 cycles, right?
Right,
The first cycle was 2014.
Yeah.
The next cycle, and this is the second electoral cycle that you have been participating.
Yeah, it was formed in 2013, and it has a very modest goal. All we want to do is change the face of American politics by electing atheists and humanists to public office. And we've got a tremendous challenge in front of us because, before this election cycle, there were 3 of those people out in public office at the state level. Juan Mendez in Arizona, he was on the Arizona State House. Ernie Chambers in Nebraska State Senate, and Jamie Raskin in the Maryland State Senate. And so this year I knew that there were more of our people out there. Coming into the job, I didn't know how I was going to find them or how many there would be and how easily they would be convinced to identify with our movement. But we did have a productive year.
No, yeah, thank you. That reminds me of back in the days when I was a research fellow at the Institute for the Study of Secularism, where actually one of my side projects was looking into atheists or agnostics running for office, and I was looking at Project VoteSmart questionnaires.
Okay.
And either I couldn't find many, of course, but also most of the ones I found were either running as independents or Greens or libertarians, which doesn't surprise me given that even though most of the people in this country do not vote for third-party candidates, the secular voter is actually overrepresented among those who vote for third parties. So it wasn't very surprising to find those, but certainly finding Democrats and definitely Republicans was a bit of a challenge. So my next question goes into, how do you find them?
Okay. Well, what I did, I really focused on open seats where the Democrat was either retiring or had moved to another position. Because in politics, generally incumbents stay in office. And so when a seat opens up, you just get a rush of people who are going to be coming after those seats. So you get a lot of candidates generally for open seats. And so my thought was, okay, even if we don't get the person who wins the primary, we might get city council members, sheriffs, ambitious school board members who might identify with us. And so I figured I'd be able to reach the most people and maybe most of our people who would identify with us, because I looked at the Pew results on the least religious states and sort of prioritized through those states. So I sent out like 900 questionnaires with a little cover letter talking about who the PAC was and what our goals were, and then in addition to that, we looked at incumbents who in their profiles were perhaps either omitted religion or had a religious preference that might be similar to us, like they might have identified as Unitarian Universalists, and a lot of Unitarian Universalists are secular, also people who identify as Jewish, a lot of Jewish secular people out there. So I sent out another 700 questionnaires to that population. So all in all, we got between 150, 200 questionnaires back. Not all of them friendly. We had some Bibles sent to us with the questionnaire attached, and one had this whole litter full of paper crosses that they'd cut out and sent to us. But still, we did get a lot of questionnaires back, and we were able to cull through them. And for our community, we were able to endorse 32 candidates who identified with us and were good on the issues. Because like you're saying, there's not many Republican atheists out there and elected officials, and even fewer when you're looking at the issues that we care about. We want to make sure that people are pro-science, respect reproductive rights, respect LGBT rights. There's another one out there, but it's escaping me. But so when you add that in, finding a Republican who also deals with church-state separation and all those other issues, you're really looking for a unicorn, because the Republican Party isn't friendly to those issues, let alone someone who's going to be an atheist. So obviously at this point, we would love to have a Republican candidate who's viable, who would endorse all those things. But right now, the Democratic Party for viable candidates is our only real hunting ground to go for.
Yeah, thank you. And so I have two questions about this. I was looking, and if you go to his to the Freethought Equality Fund's website, you can see the slate of candidates that you endorsed, and my question about the candidates that you endorse is related to, as you mentioned, there was a lot of open seats. I also saw a lot of candidates who were, it seems, running, and most of them were, the ones who were running in partisan offices were Democrats. Several of the offices were non-partisan, which we are assuming were liberal-leaning. And so many of those who ran in the open seats actually were successful in their in moving. Many of them were moving up, not necessarily first-time candidates ever. But there was also a significant portion of those candidates who were challengers and who all or most lost to Republican incumbents. So they were running in safe Republican districts.
Right. Generally, in addition to the candidates I reached out to, I also heard about other candidates from our community who were running, and then candidates came to me and said, "Hey, I'm with your community and I'm running for office." A lot of those candidates were running against Republican incumbents in very safe Republican districts, but these are great candidates because what they do is they increase the visibility of our community, which is tremendous, because we do have this unjust stigma against the atheist humanist community. And so by having candidates running even in the deepest Republican districts to put a positive face on atheism and humanism, and let people know that we're your neighbors, we're your friends, does so much to remove that bias. And so I was really proud of those candidates who were willing to do that. We had Gail Jordan, who was running in Tennessee for the state senate, and she did a great job. Also, we had Jennifer Goulet. She's running in Eastern Washington, very conservative. What was great about her campaign, she was very open about being an atheist, and when she introduced herself at town meetings, she would say she was an atheist. And the great thing there was that there wasn't ever a backlash against it in public. The very religious incumbent didn't use her atheism against her. The people running the panels didn't. I mean, she had at least one or more incidents on social media, but I was expecting much more negative feedback. And so what that tells me is that atheists can't be afraid to run for public office. Sometimes, there's this bias against us, and so that restricts us from doing things. And because there wasn't the backlash, it's important that you don't let that bias sort of paralyze you from taking action. And so I just want to say that this election season really showed that even though that bias obviously still exists, you can still go out there and run a very positive campaign, and the community is going to be more accepting than I thought they would be.
No, that's an excellent point, because that reminds me of how far we have come in like less than a decade. In terms, I still remember in 2008 when Liddy Dole in North Carolina ran that godless attack ad on Kay Hagan, even though Kay Hagan was never identified as a member of the community, and the only reason she was labeled as godless in that race was because she was in a fundraiser in which a prominent secular activist fundraiser was.
Right. There was a home at a fundraiser, and the person who owned the home is an atheist. And so the fact that atheists can't support theist candidates that they support without being attacked back then was ridiculous. I mean, and it's like you can't take atheist money in politics, according to the TAC ad, because you get tainted by it. And that is completely ridiculous, and that's what we have to fight against. And I'm hoping that 16 helped out a little bit in the candidates that ran to get away from that.
Now, one question. So the candidates that the PAC endorsed are friendly to the community. Some are members of the community, but not all necessarily identify as atheists or agnostic?
Right. For our purposes, we do have sort of we look at the broad brush of the secular community. So it's people who identify as atheists, agnostics, humanists, and also religiously unaffiliated. Because we want to bring as many people into the fold as possible. The people we endorse, they know exactly what we're pushing for. And we also did endorse allies of our community, theists who are very supportive of the secular movement. My hope is that as the candidates, because for some of these candidates and even the elected officials, I've been the first contact with them from the secular community. So as people get more comfortable with the secular community, I think people will be using different labels. Right now people say that they're religiously unaffiliated. I think soon they'll be as they get to know us better, they'll use agnostic, humanist, atheist. But for the first entry into our community, I wanted to be as open as possible with people, so that they would feel comfortable with whatever identifier they're comfortable with now. Because I was with SCA when Pete Stark came out. And his initial, when he first came out, he said, he was a Unitarian without a God belief. And then a few months later, once he started speaking at various conventions and getting to know the community, he adopted the term humanist. And then just several months later, he was comfortable with using the term atheist for himself. And I think that's going to happen with a lot of the candidates we endorse. But I really want to urge people who, are in the districts that these candidates are with, please invite them to your events and your meetings to get to know them and to show them, that they have secular constituents, and that there is a vibrant community of us out there. And so this coming year, 2017, is a great year to talk to them. And also, if you run a C3 nonprofit, you can also invite any elected official. Become involved in the electoral arena. C3s can do a lot of things without getting in trouble with the IRS. There's this great website called Boulder Advocacy, which is sponsored by the Alliance for Justice, and it details everything that nonprofits can do to be more engaged in the electoral arena. You can do voter drives, you can do scorecards, candidate forums, have elected officials speak to your groups. Elected officials want to know their constituents, and they need to know that their constituents include the secular community. So don't be afraid to become involved in the electoral arena.
That is so important to mention, and it's a point that I kind of stress when I talk to groups or I talk to people, that you can do these as a nonprofit organization. That you can invite all the candidates, and you don't have to do it for a congressional race or a state legislative race. Like you can do it for something smaller, like a school board or a county council or alderman, like those come from New England. Mm-hmm. That you can actually invite those candidates, and those are low turnout, small number of voter elections that their candidates are fishing votes out there that they want to know that there are communities out there, potential communities that they can reach out and actually gain votes. And if you invite all the candidates and not all of them show up, well, you know which candidates actually take you seriously enough to listen to your voices.
Right, and it's especially important that elections don't happen every 4 years. I mean, there's elections in this year, 2017, for local races, like you're saying, school boards, municipal races. So please get involved in the electoral process more than once every 4 years. I mean, pay attention to what elections are up. Pay attention to the candidates. Make sure you're registered to vote and vote in every opportunity you can and be an informed voter. There's lots of resources out there. I'm going to be building more into our websites to help people become more engaged. I hope to have that up in the next several months. But it's just so important to be an active citizen in the electoral process. We, as the secular community, the only way we're going to, again, get rid of this stigma against us is to be more visible and be seen as being participants in the electoral cycle.
And holding that thought, it makes me think also how, going back to where you're talking about those candidates running in safe districts that weren't going to lose and for visibility, one of the interesting things that happened in this election was technically one of the reasons the Democratic Party it's blamed for losing this election was for taking some constituencies for granted or not campaigning enough in particular places. And me, with my experience of studying elections, and seeing particularly Democrats who are not running in safe Republican districts are basically giving away those votes, even if, as we know, candidates are going to be, incumbents are going to be reelected constantly, and there's little chance. I mean, those are grounds for training candidates, and I think in particular, having secular candidates using those as training grounds is an amazing opportunity. Something that it's very low cost to some extent, because you can focus on campaigning and like honing your skills rather than trying to go into a money race, arms race with a candidate that that it's very unlikely you're going to beat.
Right, and it definitely does build skills, your leadership skills, your organizational skills. So yeah, running a campaign, makes you a better speaker, a better writer. You'll grow so much if you decide to take on a campaign. Even if it's a campaign, the odds are against you winning are very high. It's still a tremendous growth opportunity, and you get to meet. You can create a great network of people who then you can activate on other issues that are important to you and the community. So I can't stress enough how our community has to become more involved in the electoral process. It's just so important.
So I have two other questions for now. One is, you told me about all the candidates that you found, how you found them, and so I have a question about how you decide to endorse a candidate. How's the decision-making process of, okay, this is a candidate that we are going to endorse, and then of those candidates that you endorse, has anybody like backtracked and refused your endorsement?
No, I mean, I was very clear with all the candidates. That once I got the questionnaire back, I would do a phone interview with them, and I didn't want anyone going into an endorsement from an atheist humanist PAC with any disillusions. I wanted to know exactly that there might be issues, that this is really new territory that we're going out against. And so no one backed out once we'd endorsed. I had a couple candidates though who realized maybe they didn't want to take on this challenge, and we didn't go through with the endorsement process, but that was much better than had they been endorsed and then all of a sudden said, no, I want to disaffiliate with this community. So no, I was very pleased with the candidates that I endorsed this year, and please get to know them. Go to our website.
And then one question about, so I was looking at the usual suspect websites in which you find political contributions. So of course you didn't give like Newt Gingrich or Karl Rove kind of super PAC money to run. But so what's your decision making process to decide what candidates are receiving money and which candidates are just receiving endorsements? What's the difference in there and how they use it?
Sure, and well, we're a federal PAC, so we can only give money, with a few exceptions, to candidates at the federal level. So, and a lot of the people we endorsed were at the state and a few at the local level. So what we could do there was encourage our membership, and membership is free. Go to the Center for Freethought Equality, sign up, and you'll get our emails about who we're endorsing and activities that we're doing. But again, membership is free to become a member, but I can only communicate to that population about how they can become very active in campaigns. I'm not allowed to the general public saying, vote for this person. I can tell the general public, this is who we endorsed, but I can't link to websites and other fun stuff like that except through our membership. So anyway, that aside, when I was endorsing candidates, I was really looking for candidates who were viable either in the primary election and then they would get through to the general election, because I really wanted someone who would get through to the general election and be a visible candidate for our community. There were candidates that I didn't endorse simply because they really weren't taking the campaign seriously. I didn't think that they would have the resources to actually run a visibility campaign, or they would have no chance of making it to the general election. They would be bumped off in the primary election. So viability is really important to me. You don't have to, win the general election, but I do want you to be, have enough of a campaign strategy and support to be visible within the community, because that's our goal, building visibility.
Okay. Now I have a question about probably your highest profile candidate, sure, which is also my new congressman, Jamie Raskin of Maryland. And so when Raskin won his primary, which was probably the most expensive primary in the country last year, was a highly contested Democratic primary. Chris Van Hollen, who is now the junior senator from Maryland, was leaving that seat, and so Raskin won it, and he received your endorsement. I believe he also was one of the candidates who received money or independent expenditures from the PAC, and initially he was named in, I believe, in Washington Post as an atheist, and then somehow there was a backtracking so what was the process in there?
Sure. Well, Jamie Raskin's been known to our community for a really long time, and we actually endorsed him in 2015 because we knew he was running, and again, he's been at our conferences, he's received awards from various groups within our community, including the American Humanist Association, and he identifies as both humanist and Jewish, and we knew that going in. But he was a remarkable state senator. He was able to get through a lot of great legislation that's important to our community, and this is one of the things where it was an open seat, so there were more than 9 candidates running for that seat, I believe.
Only 3 serious ones.
But three very serious ones, yes. And so one of the people owned Total Beverages, and so he committed a tremendous amount of his personal fortune into the campaign. And Jamie, with our support and with the support of a lot of progressive organizations, did win the primary. And we knew if he won the primary as the Democratic candidate, he would win the general election. So we were thrilled about that. We put out press releases about the primary victory. Unfortunately, the messaging, when it got reinterpreted within our community, and people not outside of our community, the term atheist was used more than humanist. He's comfortable with the word humanist, but he wasn't comfortable with the term atheist. And publicly, he did not want to discuss, his belief or non-belief in a deity. that was unfortunate. Obviously, we would love to have a candidate who would be a role model on Capitol Hill, for the secular community. In his journey, he's not there yet. He's going to do amazing things in Congress for our community and for the issues we care about. So he's going to still be a great ally, and he's obviously going to still be working with us closely on issues. And we were at his swearing-in ceremony. He's very friendly towards us, and we're going to continue working with him.
I'm still gonna brag that my congressman was actually endorsed by
Right.
by you. So, and then I think we're gonna close soon. But I have an important question in terms of, I don't know if it was something that you did on purpose or was something that worked out that way. But looking at the candidates that you endorsed, they have a very good gender balance. And especially looking at the demographics of the secular population in general, which is skewed male, and especially like those more activists who identify as atheists or agnostic, are actually skewed even more heavily male. Mm-hmm. And knowing a lot of writing that have been about feminism in the movement and how to make the movement more welcome to women, how did that happen? It was like just a serendipity, or you were actually trying to get some sort of gender balance in the candidates?
Well, when I was reviewing, who to endorse, and that was in my mind, because I really want to show that our community isn't all old white men, and we're not. But it's especially when you're looking at the people who are religiously unaffiliated. We do have a cross section of society, and I was pleased when those applications were coming in. And naturally, I would spend a little more time making sure that they came on board for the endorsement when they were minority or female candidates. And I was really pleasantly surprised, though, that it wasn't like, I wasn't going to exclude people. I didn't have to exclude anyone to have this balance, which was really important to me. So yeah, I was thrilled. So again, this is a podcast, so you'd only be able to see the photographs of our wonderful candidates by going to the website at the Freethought Equality Fund and look at the 2016 Endorsed Candidates tab. And the one thing I want to stress before we go to is, when you think, I think Pew now says that the religiously unaffiliated is the largest voter bloc in the Democratic Party. And we're a quarter of the population. And so since there's this bias against and stigma against atheists and humanists, if we aren't participating in the electoral arena, our democracy is greatly diminished, and we're not getting all the qualified candidates out there who need to be running. So it's really up to us to make sure that we participate, because our democracy needs it. We can't have 25% of the population not participating because there's this bias against us. We need to work against it, and the only way to knock off this stigma is to be out there and be visible. So please run, and tell me you're running. Contact me.
And for those who are not running but are interested in supporting them, you still accepting donations, or how can you contribute to the fund?
Sure. First, you got to become a member of the Center for Freethought Equality, and then you can give a donation to the Freethought Equality Fund. But first become a member. Join up, big membership button at the Center for Freethought Equality. Membership is free. That way you'll get our emails about what's happening, what candidates to support, and a lot of people really feel bombarded with emails from all the candidates who are running in an election year. So one way to get rid of that bombardment is you can just write one simple check to the Freethought Equality PAC. We'll distribute the money, and you can feel good about where your money is going.
And I can vouch for, I'm actually in your listserv, so I can vouch that Ron doesn't inundate you with emails.
Okay,
he only emails when it's necessary and important. Now, before we go, any events that you have planned, or any future plans of what direction the fund is going to go?
Well, sure. For this year, I mean, there's only 2 states that are having their state legislatures up for election, and that's Virginia and New Jersey. So soon I'm going to be looking very closely at those 2 states. Also, I'm getting calls already from members of our community who are running in 2018. I want to talk with them and get them started early, because it really is important, if you're thinking of running for office, to plan ahead. And I would be glad to talk with anybody who is interested in running, to sort of set the groundwork for you. So again, I'm looking for people for 18. I'm going to be doing a lot of work in 17 to see who's out there, and we're going to have another successful year.
Well, thank you very much, Ron, for this interview. This was Juhem Navarro-Rivera. This is Secular Nation, and thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Secular Nation. I want to thank the Atheist Alliance of America for allowing me to guest host this show, and especially its president, Aaron Raff, for inviting me. I want to thank Ron Millar for its amazing work in this interview, and I want to exhort you to also read my blog, delatinown.com, where I will have some more information and some additional graphs about the work that the Freethought Equality Fund did during the 2016 election cycle. Thank you very much, and God bless. Well, not really.